Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express-News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Nancy Prayer-Johnson, Deputy Editorial Board Editor.
Kerry Clark, columnist, Editorial Board.
This is kind of a special edition of Puro Politics. We're recording this Tuesday morning right as the impeachment trial in the Texas Senate begins for Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. This is a rare event in Texas, to say the least. This is the third time we've had a Texas elected official facing impeachment in nearly 200 years of Texas history. And we want to kind of go over some of the issues involving Paxton and his thorny history as Texas Attorney General. He was impeached by the Texas House on May 27th. And it was really a bipartisan move. You had about certainly all the Democrats voted for impeachment, but you had about 70% of Republicans doing so. And the root of this was that there had been whistleblower allegations from former staff members 3 years ago. 4 of the 8 were fired and filed wrongful termination suit against Ken Paxton. He settled with them for $3.3 million, and the idea was that the Texas taxpayers were going to pick up the tab for that. And in order for that to be approved, a House committee had to investigate the situation, and their findings were disturbing, to say the least, and that led to the impeachment. And what we're really talking about is the relationship between Ken Paxton and his mega donor, Nate Paul, is an Austin real estate investor. And there are allegations that Ken Paxton was having an affair. That Nate Paul provided a job to Ken Paxton's mistress, that there were renovations done on Ken Paxton's home, that Ken Paxton was doing all kinds of things to protect Nate Paul from his legal problems, and Ken Paxton was using his office improperly. Complicating all this is the fact that Ken Paxton's wife, Angela Paxton, is a member of the Texas Senate, and she will be present, although she will not be voting. She will be present while we hear about his alleged affair, and some of the alleged corruption that went with that. There's so much to get into here, Kerry, but what are some of your big thoughts as we begin this process?
I'm just thinking it's one of the running joke sources of befuddlement for 8 years has been the fact that, he was indicted on 2 security charges in 2015, and there's still been no trial. And now after this impeachment hearing is done, there'll be a trial. But when you look at the scope of his entire tenure as Attorney General, 8 years under indictment. That's Barack Obama was president of the United States. Tony Romo was quarterback in the Dallas Cowboys.
That's some perspective.
Well, 2 presidents and 1 Prescott later. There's still no trial. There are 3rd graders who are starting school this week who weren't born. When Ken Paxton was indicted in 2015. And I despise the policies of Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick, but I don't find them buffoonish. I take them really serious.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Paxton, I just find a buffoon. Yeah. And just everything he does seems to be corrupt. It just seems to be his nature. And so now that we're in this situation where it looks like perhaps his own party is going to be the ones who decide if he continues to be the Attorney General, it's just kind of rich and tells how much tells you how much he has done to embarrass folks. I'm embarrassed to be a Texan, just more so of Ken Paxton than even Patrick and Abbott. Yeah,
I would agree with you. And I think that he's almost a caricature of the sleazy, hyper-partisan politician, demagogic politician. What are you thinking about? What do you think of Paxton?
It's embarrassing that he's a Texan, first of all. He's our top attorney. It's just embarrassing, and Texas can do better than this. I keep thinking about his wife, and as a woman, just like how she must feel to do all of this. and she was the first person. I was watching some of the coverage this morning. It's about 9:20 right now, but she's the first person to walk in the chamber, and she's waving to supporters in the gallery this morning, and the first senator, to walk through there so far. And yeah, I believe that's the picture of her. And it's just, I just keep thinking about her and what's going through her mind. And I don't think she should be there either. Yeah. So the ethics behind that, first of all. But I mean, the man, what do you call himself? Dave P on Uber. Dave P, And then I just, there were some years that I actually tuned politics out for a while. And those were the years when I was a teacher, because I was so busy as a teacher. And so, and just trying to just do my job, right? And so I had listened and stuff, but I didn't really get into the nitty gritty of what was happening. But so I've never heard this story about the pin at the airport. But I'd like for us at some point during this talk, we have to get to that story of the pin. Because when I heard it and then I looked it up and I saw video and it just blew my mind, but it shouldn't have.
And Carrie, you remember the story better than I do, I think.
He was at the airport and going through security, and there was a lawyer who was ahead of him, and the lawyer had left in the basket a $1,000 Mont Blanc pen.
$1,000.
$1,000. This was when Paxton was still a state senator, like maybe 2014. Yeah.
12.
12? That long ago.
Because I saw the video.
And so, and you see Paxton rummaging through this and taking it. He later says he picked it up by mistake, but he's rummaging through it. But there's also there's the coconut cake that HEB would send to the Attorney General's office every Christmas. And the allegations are that the cakes were sent for the staff, that Paxton would take the cake for himself. He'd do different things with it, but he just basically stole a coconut cake sent by HEB and didn't share it with his staff.
I've heard about that cake, and I want to taste that cake. I have to get some cake, but oh my gosh, share it. I had not heard that story either.
It's like, and so now
that should be an article of impeachment there.
You go from the pen to the, obviously, if just because of those things doesn't mean that you're guilty of the things he's been serious about.
It shows his character.
There's a pattern.
Yes.
He's the pig pen of Texas politics.
Oh, God.
These clouds of ethical, unethical dust clouds that follows him wherever he goes.
And he's utterly shameless too. I mean, there's never a moment when you sense where even maybe a hint of,
he's a caricature, like you said. Yes. Of what
he really is.
Yeah, and the dopey grin. I mean, I'm not getting personal about this, but he is such a cartoonish character, accused of doing serious things as the state's top attorney.
That's the thing. He's the top law officer in the state, and he has allegedly been using his office really just to further his own career and to help, a friend and a donor, and allegedly to get personal favors for himself. And when we really get back to this, I mean, this is really rooted in things that high-level people who worked in his office. These were fellow Republicans who worked for him, and they were disgusted by what they saw. And I think that's why it's very complicated for Republicans politically in this state, because I think we knew about the whistleblower allegations before this year. We'd known about them for about 3 years, but the investigation this year did find some new evidence, and I think it became harder for Republicans to sweep this under the rug. I've had just private conversations with a few Republicans in over the past couple of months, and I'm not saying that this it's not like the sample size is tells us anything, but I will say it was interesting to me to hear like the level of disgust. They might not say it publicly, but the level of disgust they have with him and the sense that he's an embarrassment to their party. And at the same time, and we can talk about this in a little bit, one of the things that he's done with his office, and I think it's been an abuse of his office, though it's not related to the impeachment, is that the way he's used his office to sort of, advance his connection with Donald Trump and to try to win favor with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, we know, I don't think even his supporters could deny that he tends to judge other elected officials by, what they do for him. I mean, he'll say about, you could be the sleaziest elected official ever and the most incompetent elected official. And he'll be there at a rally saying, oh, they're doing a great job. And he knows nothing about the job they're doing. But, and he used to think DeSantis was a great governor in Florida. Now he thinks Ron DeSantis is incompetent because Ron DeSantis is challenging him. So it's all about it. And Ken Paxton has been just a lapdog for Trump over the years. I also wanted to say that, Nancy was talking about Angela Paxton, and it's a complicated situation. One of the things that really bothers me about this, the way this is being handled, she isn't going to have a vote on this, which is appropriate because of the conflict of interest there. But she is going to be present, and she is going to be counted as one of the 31 senators when the vote gets taken on whether he's convicted or not. And the threshold for conviction is 2/3. So that means 21 out of 31. We have 12 Democrats who I think will all vote. Obviously this thing has to play out and we have to hear what the evidence is, but it's very likely that all 12 Democrats are going to vote for conviction. That means probably going to need 9 Republican, 9 out of 19, nearly half. So in a sense, even though she's not voting, she is a non-conviction vote because she's going to be considered one of the 31. If you just removed her from it and said, we're not going to count her at all, we're only going to have 30, 2/3 of that's 20. So that's one less impeachment or conviction vote that you would need. So she is affecting that vote by her presence there. And I think that that's a problem. I don't think that that's right, given her.
This is one of the sad things about American politics. And I would say, any country, that when a male politician gets accused or gets found out he's having an affair, one of the remedies is to always have his wife there, the one who cheated on.
Stand by my man.
Stand by him and be his moral support. But what you're saying, though, is this is even deeper than that. Because she's standing there not just as his moral support, but as numerical support. That her very presence could tilt the vote in his being acquitted. So it's just messy all the way around.
They're going to be ultimately voting on 16 of the 20 articles of impeachment that the House approved. 4 of them were related to the securities fraud indictment, which, like you said, has been just this unbelievably long process that we could spend a few hours talking about. This indictment that he's faced for almost the entirety of his time as Attorney General. So they're going to be voting on the other 16 articles. One of the things I wanted to talk about is my feeling that the voters of Texas are somewhat culpable in this thing, because when he was elected in 2014, there were already allegations of corruption. He had not yet been indicted. He was indicted shortly after that. But in 2018, certainly he was under indictment when he ran for re-election. By 2022, the third time, the whistleblower allegations come out. There had been a lot of stories about them. This was pretty well known, I think, to anybody who follows Texas government. And so we've learned more this year, but we knew a lot, I think, about the allegations of corruption in his office. And he had primary challengers. I think they were all flawed in different ways, but he did have primary challengers. He certainly had, a very credible general election challenger, and Texas voters had an opportunity to do something about him with some knowledge of what he had been up to, allegedly. And so I just think at a certain point, I feel, particularly in the primary process, I mean,
that's what I was going to go to, the primary. This is a red state, so people who Republicans who may not care for Paxton, what he's doing, are going to still want to keep that office in Republican hands. The point is, though, that in the primary, he did have Eva Guzman. Former Supreme Court justice. Right. They had a choice to go with her or to go with him, and they went with him.
Yeah, and that's where his sort of MAGA credentials made it. Because we were coming off of Donald Trump's denial that he lost the 2020 election, his unfounded allegations of widespread voter fraud in 2020. And Ken Paxton was one of his most loyal foot soldiers. He was there on January 6th when Trump made that speech. He did not march to the Capitol, but he was there that morning, supporting Trump. And he had filed a lawsuit, which we can get into in a minute, but in support of Trump. So I think that's where I think what we saw in the election said a couple of things about Texas politics, and it's true about other red states. One is that if you are blindly loyal to Donald Trump, you are going to be, a lot of things are going to be forgiven or excused by primary voters, and that in some way that he was seen as there was a lot of competition among the candidates in that primary, like who's more loyal to Trump. It was kind of a pathetic exercise, really. And then if you win the primary, you just basically got it, because we're a one-party state when it comes to statewide elections.
And to be fair, I want to say that, to be bipartisan about this, it's not that historically in the United States, Democrats in Louisiana.
Oh my God.
Democrats in Massachusetts, whether
and in Texas,
have a habit of voting for candidates, long entrenched office holders who they know are corrupt. But they will vote for them because they're of the party. So it's we do. Democrats do the same thing as Republicans do.
Yeah, but
Paxton is just on a different level.
That's right. But I think when you have a one party state, I think he's been able to. I think the tendencies that he has, they would be there regardless, and we've seen. Bad behavior, large and small, from him. But I think that he also knew that he was likely, if he could get through the primary, he was likely to be able to survive politically, because we're in a one-party state. And I don't think that's healthy. Regardless of which party it is.
Oh, definitely not. Our editorial board, we never write about Paxton. I don't believe we've ever written about Paxton without writing indicted Ken Paxton. The word indicted right before, just to remind
that's
people.
That's his first name, basically.
Indicted. The word indicted, the I word is always there.
That should have been his Lyft name.
Right there, right? Indicted JP. I don't know, something like that. But I did see, it's true. Like, voters in Texas, they look away. They, still vote for him. But I did see that University of Texas Politics Project poll over the weekend.
I was going to bring it up.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I don't know if that shows that there's some regret there or what. But do you want to talk about it, Gilbert?
Well, I was thinking of one that came out, I think, a couple of months ago. You might be the one that I saw said that I think 50%. This was shortly after. It was the University of Texas poll shortly after the House impeachment. And it said 50% of Texans thought the impeachment was justified. 17% said not justified. And then the others were undecided. But even more interesting to me was the fact that 31% of Republicans said it was justified. 30% said not. So again, that's where things get really interesting for Republicans. If you just look through a purely political lens, they should be making this decision based on the evidence. But if you look at it through a political lens, there is now, I think, some. There's probably been some erosion of support for Ken Paxton, or some questions among even Republicans about his behavior.
This one was September 1st, and it says among Republicans. The question was, do you think that Ken Paxton took actions while Attorney General that justify removing him from elected office? And a plurality registered voters in Texas, 47% said yes, 18% said no, 35% had no opinion. I think those 35% just don't pay attention. I don't know. They don't pay attention. They don't read. They don't pay attention.
And the tipping point, ultimately, especially if he loses in the Senate, it will be the 8 whistleblowers. Again, it's amazing. You have 8 present members of your staff who come forward to say that you are doing dirty. And while that didn't have any effect on 2022, the fact that it leads to the settlement where the $3.3 million is going to be paid by Ken Paxton or Angela Paxton, is going to be paid by Texas taxpayers. And ultimately, that's what leads to the investigation into Paxton and being impeached by the House until where we are today. So it does start with those you have to call them courageous.
Absolutely.
They came forward against their own party's interests, against their own self-interest to speak out against their boss.
Damaging their own careers and
not knowing that, four of them would get $3.3 million down the line, but still.
Yeah. One of the things that was interesting is we recently heard from former Governor Rick Perry, who he faced an indictment when he was governor, and argued at the time that it was politically motivated. But he seems to be suggesting that he sees some evidence, that he sees something substantive here, and I thought that was kind of interesting. That he was careful about what he said, but it sounded like he was saying this looks like a legitimate case.
It just seems like the way it's going. That it's going to lead to his expulsion from office. But, we live in a time where you can't take anything like that for granted. But we're talking about, 4,000 pages of documentation, and you've got, conversations with, even the whole deal with putting his finances into a trust. There's stories about how he's violated that. There's just so much about him. And I think, but then at the same time, it's easy also to say, okay, we've had this, with the Republican Party, we've elected this guy 3 times. So he's done whatever good he's going to do to us. So now we can get rid of him. But again, there's been this consistency of corruption that shadowed him since before he took office. So it's great that maybe now you're going to get rid of him. But man, you could have done this a long time ago.
And, Donald Trump came out against the impeachment process in May. He's been a strong supporter of Ken Paxton's. It'll be interesting to see what he has to say, if anything, in the weeks to come. But, Ken Paxton has said that this whole thing is, and this has kind of been his running line, that this is politically motivated, and that they're trying to stop, all this work that he's doing for Texas. And really, a lot of it has been, has been him trying to advance the MAGA cause. And there were a couple of things he did related to the 2020 election that I wanted to talk about. One of them he's very proud of. I saw an interview with him. He was basically saying he saved Texas for Trump because he prevented Harris County from sending out mail ballot applications to voters across Harris County. Now, he exaggerated, I think, his impact, because he suggested, he seemed to suggest that every single person who would have received an application would have actually voted, and that they would have voted Democrat, and they would have, or most of them would have voted Democrat, and it would have tilted the state to Trump, away from Trump. But when you look at what he was really trying to do, this was at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Harris County was simply saying, we want to make these applications available. They're not sending ballots. There are states that do universal mail voting, like California, that will send out ballots to all registered voters. This was not that type of thing. This was, we're simply going to send the application, which you have to fill out. You have to demonstrate on the application that you meet one of the criteria, whether it's being 65 or over, or having a disability, or one of the others. And then it has to be approved, and then they send you an application. Keep in mind that as far as I know, all the counties that I'm aware of, certainly the big counties, and Bexar County is one of those, they have the applications available on their websites. You can print them out. This is not some thing that should not be, that we're trying to keep from people, or that it's, that there's some concern with voter fraud in making it available. It's made available on websites routinely. What Harris County was trying to do is say that, some people maybe are not aware of that, or maybe they don't have internet access, or let's send it to them to make it easier, because voting is actually a health concern, massive in-person voting this year. And so he was very proud of the fact that he blocked them from doing that. And I think what that says is, people can decide what they think of that. I don't think that speaks well.
But that's the part also where that's consistent with Republican leadership, be it the governor, be it the lieutenant governor, be it the state legislature, the state senate, is trying to suppress, targeting Harris County specifically, but overall just trying to suppress the vote. So that's where Paxton fits in perfectly with his party, and why and why a lot of stuff was ignored.
Yeah, and Donald Trump has been basically someone who's spoken often of his hatred for mail voting, though he's voted by mail many times himself. Yeah. But it's okay for him. The other thing is that Ken Paxton was supported Donald Trump's big lie about election fraud in 2020, and he filed lawsuits which failed against 4 swing states. And it was Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That's right. And his complaint was that they had changed their election rules in the year leading up to the November 2020 election. And we had states changing the rule. Most of these changes that happened in 2020 in different states, they were related to COVID-19 and concerns about making voting safe for everybody. Mm-hmm. The thing I wanted to mention is that there were actually 30 states in that year that changed election rules. Ken Paxton targeted the 4 states that I think there were 13 of those 30 were states that Trump actually won. Mm-hmm. There were no lawsuits against those states
of course
from
not.
Ken Paxton. Yeah. He targeted the 4 that were close.
And name the states again.
Georgia.
Okay, Atlanta. Go on.
There you go. Exactly.
Go on.
Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia.
Thank you. Wisconsin.
Milwaukee.
All right. And Michigan.
Detroit.
Yeah. There you go. You got it. Okay. I think we're done. Okay. So
what is it about the demographics of those particular cities?
I wonder.
I'm just looking at your shirt.
Yeah.
Just looking at you.
Very good point, Gary. So, so I mean, clearly this wasn't a deal where he's saying like, I'm really disturbed that we've had some changes in voting. It's not right to have to change the voting.
The Supreme Court basically laughed it.
They laughed it out.
This Supreme Court laughed it out.
Yeah, very conservative. Yeah. Supreme Court with 3 Trump appointees. So these are the 4 that could have swung the election to Trump, and we're gonna target those. It's also worth mentioning that Texas changed its election rules in 2020. Greg Abbott unilaterally added 6 days to early voting because he wanted to spread out the time period, again, to make it safer during the pandemic. And he did it without the legislature. Should we take those 38 electoral votes away from Donald Trump because Texas changed its election rules in 2020? I don't think so. It was, it was very obvious what he was doing here. And again, this has nothing to do with what the Senate will be looking at. It's not part of the impeachment, but I think it speaks to what a cynical and calculating figure he is. Whether they find out that he's, committed illegal acts or not, that's a separate issue. But I don't think that it's very clear to me that this is a person who has abused his office. This was an abuse of his office, what he tried to do with regard to the election.
It's just interesting if you track his legal problems with that of Trump, and to the point where we are now, where obviously the former president, it's like a lot of receipts are being called in, and he may have to actually pay for what he's done. And the same thing's happening with Paxton. So it's almost like, Paxton tied himself to Trump, for what he thought would be ascending a little bit higher if he could overturn the election. And now he's going that way with Trump.
Yeah, so. It's a great point. Well, I think on that note, we'll probably wrap things up. This is going to be fascinating to watch over the next few weeks. I think that they're going to convict him, but I don't have any inside knowledge, and I think that it is really wide open. And I do think that he's reached a point where Republicans are starting to, many, not all of them, but many Texas Republicans are starting to want to distance themselves from him.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I sure hope so. Yeah. I mean, if not, it's going to, and I know we sat here and talked about how bad Texas is and how embarrassing it is and how voters still kept him in despite everything that we know. But if if Republicans send that message that he isn't so above the law that he cannot get away with this right here.
Right.
I mean, 16 counts. You have to put indicted before his name every time you write about him. I mean, it's just across the board, unethical, terrible, and it's embarrassing. And I mean, it's going to speak volumes if they do the right thing here. Yeah. And if they don't, it's going to be, I mean, I don't even want to think about it. It's really going to be really terrible.
And it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the evidence is laid out, because this, I think this is really compelling evidence that we've heard. But, you know, there are a lot of details that we still have yet to learn. I know he's challenged the house renovation story that he got Nate Paul to pay for that. And that's just one of many aspects to the story. But I mean, this is it's going to be really something to watch. And thank you all for listening. We hope everyone's doing well, and we'll be back with you next week. Take care.